Do you remember trying to unlock Luigi in Super Mario 64? Did you ever look for Mew under the truck in Vermillion City, or attempt to beat the Running Man in Ocarina of Time? Rumours like these have become infamous over the years, stemming from the creativity of human imagination and spreading by word of mouth. In an age when myths were harder to debunk and the internet was a much simpler place, it was hard not to get sucked into the world of urban legends in gaming. How's it going everyone, and welcome back to the Loading Zone, where today we're going to be talking about what has become something of a lost art nowadays, and that is playground rumours surrounding video games. The stories that you'd hear from other kids about the characters that they unlocked in Smash Bros, or how they got the Triforce in Ocarina of Time. Things that deep down we probably didn't believe but wanted to be true. These days, with the gaming community on the internet being as big as it is, such rumours can't really exist in this climate and get shut down pretty quickly, but back in the day they were running rampant, and one of the biggest ones centres around Super Mario 64, or more specifically, the idea that you could play as Luigi in that game. Now, those of you who've played Mario 64 know that no matter what methods you use, you cannot unlock him, but people had a lot of ideas when the game was initially released. Most of it centred around the castle courtyard, or the statue of a star within it to be precise. On that statue, on the front of it, there's this plaque, which has some text on it. And this text, it's very hard to make out, because it's a blurry N64 texture, but the majority of people have read it as L is real 2401. But it could also say Eternal Star. Now, the first interpretation being L is real is where the idea of Luigi being in the game came from, with the L of course representing Luigi's hat, but that brings into question the meaning of 2401. I mean, the odds are, it means absolutely nothing, because you find the same texture on a stone in Dodongo's cavern just above the bridge, but some people thought, hey, 2401, if you run around the statue 2401 times, then you unlock Luigi. I remember some crummy YouTube videos where a guy would just film his TV screen with a phone camera and go through some stupidly elaborate methods, like, again, running around in circles, jumping between the trees in a specific order, killing the boos, whatever it was, and then allegedly would unlock Luigi. I gotta admit, as a kid, I did actually try some of these, and yeah, to my disappointment, I did not unlock Luigi. Now, 2401 could also be seen as a date, so if you were to look at this in the British way, 2401 would be the 24th of January, but you could also see it as the 4th of February 2001. And interestingly enough, Paper Mario actually released in North America on this date, but this was a complete coincidence, I'd imagine, because I don't think they'd have had that kind of foresight when they were making Super Mario 64 to know that Paper Mario would release on this exact date, especially considering the fact that it was delayed from its initially planned launch. But what's neat about L is real is the fact that it's actually come full circle very recently, because back in 2020 there was an asset leak for a bunch of Nintendo 64 games, and within this leak, people actually found the prototype model of Luigi, which they were able to piece together. Like, over the years there have been loads of ROM hacks and fan-made models of Luigi, but there's never been an official model by Nintendo that's been found, up until that point. I believe there was code in the game for a planned multiplayer co-op mode, but this was scrapped pretty early because of hardware limitations. I think the idea was that one player would be Mario, one player would be Luigi, and you'd have them both on the same screen, but evidently this didn't make the final cut. But what's absolutely mind-blowing about this whole situation is that the date that the Luigi model was found was July the 25th, 2020, which was exactly 24 years and 1 month after Super Mario 64's release in 1996. In other words, 2401. So, in a weird sort of way, L was real all along. It's funny how the world works sometimes, isn't it? Now, while Luigi was not playable in Super Mario 64, where he did finally get his chance to shine was in Super Mario 64 DS in 2004, where he appeared as a playable character alongside Yoshi, Mario, and Wario, but that left a lot of people wondering, because if we've got 3 of the 4 horsemen here, then where's Waluigi? And naturally, in a very similar fashion to Luigi in Mario 64, many rumours started to surface. A lot of them still centred around the L is real statue again, with there allegedly being some way to interact with it to unlock Waluigi. And the story that was going around was about this room in the castle where you switch between the characters. There's a door with an M, an L, and a W for switching to Mario, Luigi, and Wario respectively, and they're all locked. You get the keys by beating certain bosses like Goom Boss, Chief Chili, and King Boo. But then also in that room, there's a mysterious fourth white door with no letters above it. To get the key for that one, you have to catch, I think, some glowing white rabbits, and when you open it, it's literally just a star. And if you go back, you hear Boozer laughing at you for some reason. But according to the rumor mill, there was some way to get Waluigi via that door. I remember there being something about a dark block in the wall of the castle in the file select screen, which isn't there in game, and allegedly you had to fire yourself into it with a cannon and you'd unlock a secret room in the castle, and yeah, it's pretty obvious, but that room does not exist. Another thing that gained quite a bit of a reputation, a bit of notoriety, was a fake magazine scan that made the rounds called Purple Prizes, and it gave this very long-winded, completely fabricated method for unlocking Waluigi, which involved getting all the stars in the game and finding a secret switch somewhere in the castle, which would in turn change the white door in that room into a purple Waluigi door, and then to get the key to said door you'd have to fight against a rabbit king. And the scan also had some fake images of Waluigi in the game with like a custom made model and some descriptions of his unique abilities, because all the characters could do different things in that game. Luigi had the spinny backflip, Wario could punch these black blocks that other characters couldn't break, and according to Purple Prizes, Waluigi had springs in his shoes and he'd be able to jump higher and further than any other character. And also there were the power flowers, which gave you different abilities. So for Mario it was the wing cap, Luigi it was invisibility, and Wario it was Metal Wario. And for Waluigi it was the ability to run at warp speed. There was also apparently some kind of secret ending for beating the game as him, but again, this was completely made up. I believe it was just an April Fool's joke that the guy revealed 2 days after it was made, but I don't think the reveal gained that much attention, so a lot of people took this seriously, and it got very popular back in Super Mario 64 DS's heyday, but it was never really meant to be, because unlike in Mario 64 where there was actually code found for Luigi being in the game, there was no such thing for Waluigi in Mario 64 DS. He was never planned, which is a real shame. I always wanted to play as him as a kid, but never got the chance to. Just out of pure desperation, I had the tiniest sliver of hope that any of these methods would work, but none of them did. And on the subject of Mario still, another myth that got quite popular was about Mario Kart 64, or the Bowser's Castle track from that game to be exact. All around the interior, you'll find lots of hazards to dodge, and one of the most prominent of said hazards were the thwomps, which would move around and stomp on you, but in one of the rooms, you find something peculiar, because at the end of a corridor, there's a green thwomp who's locked behind bars, and this sparked quite a bit of discussion, because people are thinking, like, A, who is this guy? B, why is he green? And C, what did he do that was so bad that even Bowser felt the need to lock him up? There was just so many questions, so much speculation about this one thwomp, and it got to a point where fans even gave him a name. They called him Marty, a little nickname. People said all sorts of things, like there was a way to break him out of the jail and unlock him as a playable character, but sadly, no matter how hard you try, you just can't break the bars open. There is no way to hashtag free Marty. My personal headcanon as a kid was that he was just a good thwomp who didn't want to stomp on Mario or any of the other racers, so he got locked up for not doing his job properly. I don't think he was even green either. It was just the yellow lighting in the prison cell that made him look that way. It was just people having fun, really. But as far as alleged unlockable characters go, Smash Bros was also subject to its fair share of urban legends, particularly the earlier Smash games, because in the more modern games like Smash 4 and Smash Ultimate, you have leaks flying around, and I guess they're as close to Playground Rumours as it gets, but they're not quite the same thing. But back in the Melee days, there was another one of these April Fool's Day pranks. This time it was from an actual magazine, not a fake one, saying you could unlock Sonic and Tails in the game by beating 20 opponents in Cruel Melee, and those of you who've played Cruel Melee know that that's a very tough feat to achieve, but I can see why people would think there is some credibility to this, because the melee character select screen does have 2 slots in the bottom left and bottom right corners respectively, so it would make sense for there to be 2 more characters to unlock. Of course, Sonic did make his debut as a fighter in Smash Bros. Brawl, but we've yet to see Tails added. But in Smash Bros. Brawl, there were actually 7 characters that were planned to be in the game but were cut, and they were dubbed the Forbidden 7, comprising of Roy, Mewtwo, Dr. Mario, Dixie Kong, Toon Zelda, and Toon Sheik, as well as Plusle and Minun as a duo character. Unlike many of the other tall tales I've talked about in this video, this one actually had some grounds to it because there were incomplete files found for these characters within the game's code, and they were likely gonna be playable at some point. I remember really wanting to unlock Roy because he was my main in Melee, and I was kind of disappointed that he wasn't in Brawl. It was a very sad time, and I watched a few videos that claimed to have found a way to unlock him and Mewtwo, but once again, it was just nothing but broken dreams and false hope. Thanks to the power of mods though, we've got stuff like Project M, which has brought Roy and Mewtwo into the game alongside a whole host of other mods, because yeah, the Brawl modding scene is pretty massive. I do find it interesting that of all the Zelda characters, they were planning to add Toon Zelda with like a Sheik or Tetra swap, because that would just be another Zelda in the game, and now in Ultimate we look at it, we've got 3 Links, we've got Ganondorf, and 2 Zeldas in the form of Zelda and Sheik. You would have thought they'd try and add some variety with maybe like Impa or something, but no, I guess they were dead set on the Triforce trio. Now, as far as the Zelda franchise itself goes, there was one man in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time who drove many people insane, and that was the Running Man. He first appears in Hyrule Field, where he's part of the Happy Mask quest that you have to do as Child Link. So for that, you've got to buy masks from the Happy Mask salesman and find customers to sell them to, and the Running Man was one of these customers. He was running around Lon Lon Ranch, just around the circumference. But when you go forward in time and become Adult Link, you instead find him in the Carpenter's Tent in Gerudo's Valley, and he challenges you to a race, so you have to go all the way from there to the Lost Woods. Now, no matter how fast you get there, whatever methods you try, the Running Man will always beat you, but it always feels like you get so close, because the game was coded in such a way that he'd beat you by 1 second every single time. And of course, everyone was looking for some kind of way to win, but even with mods, with cheats like moon jumping, or even just messing with the timer so you get to the Lost Woods in 0 minutes and 0 seconds, it still doesn't work, because there's no dialogue sequence in the game's code for you beating him. Someone on YouTube did upload a video a long time ago claiming to have found a method to win against the Running Man, which was to initiate the race, then to go back in time as young Link, then to go to the Lost Woods, and to wait 7 in-game years, which would be the equivalent of leaving the game on for a whole week, and only then would you be able to win. But people shut this down pretty quickly, because after 4 minutes the Running Man just gives up on waiting for you because you're too slow, so it's impossible to even do this, let alone see the results. The guy did make some edited dialogue sequences that had people going for a while, stuff about the alleged Sky Temple in that game, which is a whole nother kettle of fish in itself. I think because there was a light medallion, people thought there was going to be another dungeon as Adult Link, which is where the Sky Temple comes in. And apparently, according to the fake text from the Running Man, that's where the reward for beating him would be. But sadly, as we all know, there is no such thing as the Sky Temple, at least in Ocarina of Time. As I said earlier, we don't really get this type of thing happening nowadays because of how quickly things can get debunked, but I suppose some modern takes on the whole playground rumor thing would be things like the fake Mario Party DS anti-piracy screen, the idea of every copy of Mario 64 being personalized, the Wario apparition, that sort of thing. But it's a bit different from the kids on the playground telling you stories about how they got Mew from under the truck in Pokemon Blue, or got rid of the rocks in Grunty's lair in Banjo-Tooie so they were able to explore the whole thing. While these urban legends rarely amount to anything, it's interesting to look back on just how wild the things people came up with were all those years ago. I think that's about all we've got time for today on the Loading Zone podcast, but thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little discussion, and I will hopefully see you guys in the next one.